Good morning, or whatever time of day you're watching this. This is Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. I'm your host, Sir Chad Everett Broshears. Today's episode is on apologize. Specifically, what does it mean? Oh, it's really interesting how, again, this series is dedicated to, and why it's called Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia, is that we come up in a culture, in a society, that we kind of feel like we're well matured given what our species has come from and where we currently are, and even compared to other populations throughout the world, we have this idea that we're well established, well developed. But the reality is, we'll have specific areas that we're well developed in with strengths, and then other areas that we have weaknesses, but we're typically not taught how to view those things in such a way that we can make them workable, and kind of almost treat it like as if it's a genetic encoding to what we can expect in our life and our abilities to navigate life. So this is to help expose it. Originally, this show started off from the 8 areas of maturity that I've spoken about previously in my videos. Now this is a bit more. This is just help fleshing things out, picking subjects at a time to do it. So now, we all have areas that we have strengths. We all have specific strengths in our families, things that attributes that our families have that others don't, simply because of the development that our family has gone through, from all types of aspects, and they just give us what we become as this cocktail of a human being. And this show's intention is to help us break through the challenges of being stuck, thinking that we are without options and without a potential to develop. So today's subject, being on apologize, falls into that with, to me, great clarity, as most of us have a statement without meaning. Our apologies come out because of fear of loss, not desire to correct, or desires to connect. And things that really do us a great injustice is that we're not really taught well how to communicate, even though we're using language to transfer thoughts to one another. We're not taught in a way to communicate where we understand where the other person is. I hear where you are, but it doesn't mean I understand where you are. And if you don't have the understanding of where the other person is, you can create all sorts of chaos, even though you both leave that conversation with a confident grip that you understand where the two of you are going, and from that conversation, we have an agreement, we have an understanding. But we're not taught to do what's called steel manning. And steel manning is where you say back to the person that you just spoke to, you say back to them specifically what you heard them say to what you understood they said. It's the exact opposite of what's called straw manning. We won't get into the definitions on these, other than straw manning is where you make up a position somebody else has that is not true. And that made up definition is to reduce the other person's position and argument, if you will, or what they believe, to make it something that it really isn't. Steel manning is the other side of it, where you want to have real clarity for what that person means, what they understand, what they're saying, and what they want you to understand. We're taught in the world of apologies, most of us believe an apology is a thing that asks for forgiveness so that what was prior can maintain. You can continue to have whatever it was prior to the moment you felt an apology was necessary, the other person felt an apology was necessary. And that can simply just be a cycle that turns into something that could be resembled or referred to as being abusive. Now, it doesn't mean abusive in the sense of emotionally challenging all the time, but, emotion will be involved with this. is typically an apology has to do with feeling something has been done against, something wrong has been done against somebody. That's pretty much the basis of most apologies, or I'd say all of them, as far as recollection of them at the moment. So as far as apologizing, what apologizing means as a working definition that I use is you apologize, you're saying that whatever it was that caused the issue, you were promising, or you were changing who you are in a way that that thing does not happen again. But an apology is a promise of change. It makes sense, right? I mean, and it comes across, and when you hear it that way, it just says, yeah, of course it is. This sounds redundant. Of course I know that. That's not, you don't necessarily know it if you don't have that as a working definition. And a working definition means it makes a difference in your life now because it's working. I am someone who apologizes very rarely. I do not apologize often. And it's not out of spite, it's not out of aggression, it's not out of hostility or stubbornness. It's out of honesty. So I rarely apologize simply because I don't live in a world where I regret most of my actions or my behaviors. I care for the people that are involved with me. I care for who they are, but I don't want to derail who I am in order to meet the narrative of what they want me to be, how they want me to fit into the puzzle of their life. So I won't apologize without sincerity. So if I say I'm sorry to you, then it is incredibly heartfelt, and it comes with a bill of goods on my part. It means the bill of goods are, I am going to be changing these things so that you do not feel that insult again, that challenge again. But that's also me taking stock of my ability to communicate. It's my actions and what they're perceived to be, and how I create understanding of what people are perceiving my actions to be. Now, it's with a heavy burden that I give apology. And what I mean by heavy burden is not that, oh, I don't want to do it, because if you've watched my series and you know me in person, you know I'm always willing to take on the burden. I am willing to bear the cross. I'm willing to create the suffrage necessary to evolve my phoenix, right? To continue to evolve as a human being. I'm willing to do the work, and I will always do the work, as the future requires it. My future and who I be requires it. So when I give an apology, it is incredibly, incredibly effective on my part, because I truly don't intend to have whatever it was happen again. Now, that usually comes with, and probably no surprise to anyone, a lot of conversation, because the conversation needs to establish the foundation of what that change is, and if the change is necessary. Because the apology that's being sought may actually be the work from the seeker. The person that thinks or feels they are owed the apology, to say it differently, the person that thinks or feels they are owed the apology may very well be the one that requires to do the work, and not the person they want the apology from. Being that their attachment or their view may be something that is not the other person's duty or responsibility, but that be the responsibility of the person seeking the apology, the one that feels like they were insulted. There's a big shift in that reality, because that's my reality, right? I will apologize. Absolutely. I'm incredibly insightful. I go through moments often. I don't typically go off into daydreams where I think about running through fields of flowers and things like that. I go into previous events in my life, and I start reestablishing who I was at the time to what I understand me now, right? So it's kind of like how I've evolved to this point. as my insights and views of the world and my communication connections, everything else, and I'll take who I am now and go all the way back to whenever that moment occurred, and I judge what happened at that moment through the lens of my present self. And I give myself forgiveness, obviously. I give myself compassion. I give myself the understanding that, I did said or whatever, or I experienced things the way that I did because of the way the reality is, and that's how it was then. And what can I learn from it? So it's a great deal of introspection that I use on myself in order to verify that I am developing consistently. I have very, very few regrets in my life, simply because I own who I am, and I try to communicate that with other people whenever I make promises, because broken promises typically ask for apologies. The evolution of who you are from the moment you make the promise until the infraction, whatever that makes people feel like the apology is necessary. The change from agreements, from the promise to what it is after the evolution of you or the environment or time. It all adds up to the way that we communicate with other people to get them to understand where we are, what we wish to have. I try very hard, and I put a great deal of effort into not allowing insecurities of my own to infect other people. Now, it's not easy, because insecurities bring a lot of emotional stuff. But I do what I can. I try to stay as conscious as possible, because life is not easy, and a lot of people are learning a lot of lessons. Now, they may not be learning lessons with a voluntary intent. It can very well be consequences of where they've put themselves. But I do what I can to try to be careful with that, because those insecurities can disrupt other people, because it may be more than they can bear. So I do what I can try to not do that to people. Does it mean that I've never done it? Absolutely not. I've done it many times. And it's hard to be that aware of who you are at the moment somebody else is going through something when you're stuck, when you're emotionally challenged. So that's whenever I'll create my apologies, typically, and there's other instances, but when I put my insecurity on somebody else, then they are owed an apology by me. And that's where my work is, to be less insecure, but I'm using that time and that upset to help me understand where my work is, because I need to get to work on that. That is required so that I don't create more chaos in people's lives. Now, there are times for chaos, absolutely. The snow globe, a little bit of chaos today is better than the world-breaking dragon tomorrow. And if you're not familiar with what I mean by dragon and all of that, go back to the dragon series, and I'll add more to it over time. But a dragon simply is the thing that you're afraid to face at the moment that the time is to face it. Previous experience for me was there was a moment when I knew that I should have said or asked a deeper question, and steel-manned my ex and I in our conversation, so that we both understood what we were both agreeing to at the moment the conversation was taking place. And that would have, at that moment, I created a little dragon, because I knew there was something more that I needed to talk about. And that dragon became a world breaker. And that's what dragons want to become, by the way. It's the things that you don't want to face eventually grow into bigger issues. And it can get to the point that it destroys a world. And it did in my instance. It was a world breaker. Cute little bastard in the beginning, and then he turned into this world-ending creature. Just simply because of the little bit of fear and not communicating at the depth that I know me be capable of communicating, or that I am capable of communicating. So to have an apology is to change your actions, to change something about the experience that you and the other person had. Now, an apology is never one-sided. when you give an apology, you're not only telling them that you're going to change a specific thinking or behavior or something. You're not only saying that, you're also changing in your own world if it is a genuine apology, because you need to change something about what you've done. Now, that can simply be you need to change the way you communicate. And in most instances, I say that be present. It is necessary. But it's not in all, but in most, in my opinion. So, with the apologies, it is always going to be more than one sided. It doesn't mean the other person apologizes to you. They may not have that depth, right? So, if you have two very mature people that have done the work, when the apology occurs, both people may feel invoked to apologize. So take like somebody that has let's say an equal amount of work that I've put in, and I apologize to that person, they would certainly apologize back to me for the infraction that perhaps it was within their understanding, and they didn't understand necessarily what I was communicating at the time, or understand why I made the decisions that I made that led to the infraction that was begging demanding of an apology, or begging of an apology. So now, to move from the genuine and sincere apologies into apologies of abuse, you can abuse apologies simply by giving insincere apologies to manipulate somebody so that they stay in place. And I say this happens often because people will say, no, I'm sorry, please forgive me, let me back in. And the problem or the challenge with that is that it creates this emotional desire, and it preys on insecurity. So please let me back in. I won't do it again. That kind of stuff is saying the changes will happen, but be it that they're so insincere, they're not going to make any changes. They're going to hope that you stay as dependent on them as you are, or become more dependent on them, so that you'll overlook the thing that is the infraction, whatever that thing is. Now, there's a lot that goes into it, but with the insincere apologies creates this kind of profile for what apologies mean in other relationships. So when you hear an apology and you've been jaded because of having somebody apologize so many times before with something meaningful to you, and they didn't live up to that expectation that you set once the apology was created, what you accepted of their behavior and you wanted to see different or change, that person is teaching you not to believe apologies, even when you have a conversation with somebody that is completely unrelated. Unrelated subjects may lessen the effect of cynicism towards an apology, but that doesn't mean that in the similar situations, romantic relationships are very common, in my opinion, as well, where insincere apologies happen because of fear of loss. I don't want to lose you, so therefore I'm going to, tell you and say to you whatever is necessary to keep you in my life. But I don't intend to change it. Maybe I'll change the way that you understand that I do something. I might become more secretive, or get better at preventing you from finding out. So now, I don't encourage that, because that is cowardice. I encourage, obviously from my side, I want to be as sincere and clear and as honest as possible, because I love myself that much not to create hell. And every time you lie, in the way that I view it, is every time I lie, I create a hell, and I don't want to live in one. So I would rather that I give everybody else the same degree of opportunity to grow as I myself want, and that is, with honesty, I make my decisions. And when I know what somebody else is doing and whatever they've promised or whatever they've said is true, I give them that it be true, and then I work my way through it. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean it goes without skepticism, because of course I have skepticism in these things. Whenever somebody says something that sounds a bit more than, let's say it's a bit more extra than ordinary, so extraordinary, right? I'll hear what they have to say. Doesn't mean that I would necessarily believe them completely, but I'm not damning them to being a liar either. Unless I just know it to be a lie, then I think to myself, what is it that they want to gain based off of sharing that? And from there, I still create companionship and multiple relationships. It's just somebody wants and needs love. They may be starved for it and have never really had somebody give them the kind of mature love or companionship or acceptance that would later start to break the pattern of lying. Now, of course, with connection, you can correct. So as you get closer with somebody, you can start communicating at such a level that you can call them out on lying without making it insulting. Because if somebody lies and then they feel insulted that they've been caught lying, that can easily get them to want to either kill off whatever it is, the relationship that they have with that person, or the potential relationship or whatever it might be, and it causes them to say, you know what, I'm just going to move on and find somebody else who'll believe me. Now, I'm not talking about people that are clinical narcissists or sociopaths or psychopaths. Those are different categories of people. It's hard to tell sometimes who those people until you get more time and experience with them. But I'm talking about the average person that doesn't fall into those categories. We all have traits of those, some trait levels of those things, but we're so low on it, we'd never be classified as being, any one of those three things, three psychological positions, if you will. So, now, creating the relationships you want to create, you have to have the clarity and the honesty to create those. And that needs to start with the I values. Go back to the I values conversations and videos that I put out there for that. But you want to establish so much love for yourself that you won't intentionally mislead somebody else so that they love you. Because if you have a deficit of love, you'll go around trying to collect it from other people. And that's a very unhealthy place to be, because it makes you, one, dependent on somebody else, which could make you a slave or a serf to them, to some facet of your existence, and not for companionship. That's what you're trading it for. I'm trading my freedoms in certain ways and making to create opportunity for companionship. I'm going to be a serf to you, a slave to you, and that can be a devastating reality, because you'll never really be the whole you that you are. You'll only be the fractional you that gets the other person to accept who you want them to believe you are. And then along the way, whenever those little infractions show up, that start to prove that you're not who you're claiming to be, you'll have to apologize through that in order to get the person to believe that you're deserving of staying in that relationship. Or the other person do that to you, however you want to do that. So don't, in my position, that's why I don't apologize often, is that I don't want to ever give an insincere apology. I don't want to coerce somebody into wanting to have any kind of relationship with me. I do not choose that. I love myself too much to do that to somebody else, because I care too much for people. And life is what you make it, and is so incredibly robust with opportunities to experience things that I don't want to create something that's so restrictive that I'm going to have to promise to change my behaviors every time I turn around because of the restrictions and parameters that I put on the relationships that I become dependent on. I don't want that for myself. I don't want that for anybody else. And that's, again, also a big part of why I do this channel, is to try to give different insight. So, all right, that'll pretty much sum it up for today's episode. But I hope that you've taken value out of this. Please like, subscribe, share. These videos are a great way to start a conversation with somebody in your life. Again, I'm not saying that I'm 100% right. I'm just sharing my experiences and from my education, also what I understand about the world and the way things occur. I encourage that we all kind of take a different look. Details do matter. They matter a lot. And if we don't make that true, then we can continue to sit in a snow globe of chaos, because we're not looking for the actual details to understand why we're where we are. We're just in that I don't I don't know and I don't care. I'm upset and somebody else is responsible. That's a horrible place to be, because that's a place where you sit back angry, stuck in where you are in life, waiting for somebody to apologize so you can finally breathe and move on, or go back into what pattern you were so familiar with. That can be painful. So, but that's why I do this. I really do want to make a big difference over time in people's lives, simply by just letting them know they're not alone, and to give different perspectives that can potentially help them outgrow where they're currently stuck. So this is a way of creating a very enriched and full life. I hope that you do choose to join me on this journey. You are where you are, and you can be wherever you want to. You just have to figure out how to get there. So, and hopefully these videos will help give some insight to build on, so that you can progress yourself into that next stage of life, become the next version of the Phoenix. So it's not easy. Definitely not easy, but it's worth it. Let's create that life together. So stick with me. Catch you on the next one. And this is Sir Chad Everett Brochures, and this is Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. Talk to you soon. Bye.